for part 2 of this 1966 Gibson LG-0 restoration. In last week's video we replaced the original plastic bridge with this new rosewood bridge and tall bone saddle, and in this week's video we'll do a neck reset. I've decided to lower the saddle a little bit before I make my calculations. I decided that it's a little too high to base everything on that. It's about 12 millimeters from the soundboard. I'm going to bring it down to 10.5. So I'll shave that, restring it, and make some calculations. Stick around. Okay, I've lowered the saddle down to where it's about 10 millimeters here on the high E string, and I've measured a string height at the 12th fret of 4.5 millimeters with 4 millimeters respectively on the treble string. Hypothetically, I want to bring that down 2 millimeters to have a comfortable playing action. So like I said, hypothetically, to do that, we would lower the saddle 4 millimeters, double of what we want the action to be. So that's my first measurement, is 4 millimeters. Second measurement is the heel to body, or the length of the heel, which is 9 millimeters. And my third measurement is the neck to body joint to saddle, which is 28.2 millimeters. Let's call it 28.1. No, 28.2. Okay, so we take 4 millimeters times 9 millimeters divided by actually 28.2 centimeters, 282 millimeters. We get 1.28 millimeters to remove. That's the material we're going to remove from the tip of the heel in a wedge shape. And since I had basically no fret or neck relief at all, I want to go ahead and loosen the truss rod just a tad, so don't forget later. And look, black spray paint still on there. Oh, it was barely tightened. Huh. It's weird. We've got a slight back bow in the neck with no tension on the truss rod. So, boy, we might have to use 13 gauge strings on this guitar when we're finished, which is good to know ahead of time. I've done a neck reset on a 66 Gibson before, and it did not go the easiest. It was fit with such accuracy that it made it very difficult to remove the neck. So I'm going to anticipate having to take a couple extra measures here with caution. And here are my notes from the 66 LG-1. Although we're working on an LG-0, I'm going to assume it's the same shape Dovetail, and they used the same cutters to make it. So my notes say to drill 10 millimeters at the 15th fret and 6 millimeters at the 14th fret. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to drill some holes. Pull 2 frets. I lubricated it with simple green to prevent chip out, but it seems a little chippy already, so let's heat it up. Create a little bit of steam. And this is a 40-watt soldering pen. If you only have a 15, you might have to actually put some solder on the fret to get it to heat up correctly. Or you could use a 40-watter or higher. I think we've created a little steam. Another thing we can do before we pull the neck is score the lacquer line, which, as you could imagine, is not thick lacquer. It's just a very... But it does pool up a little bit here in these corners, so yeah. I want to score this line. I'll go all the way around. There's definitely no void there at the 14th fret. But the 15th fret, there's a great big void. Big old pocket. I think we're probably going to heat this up for 10-12 minutes and find out that we will need to activate the HGR-2000S. Let's wait and see. Here's a guitar string. Listen to this. Big void back there. Big old void. I just moved it over here to this vise, and I dropped in one of these pipettes of boiling hot water, and I'm seeing how loose it feels. I don't feel any water coming out the bottom here, so I know it's glued down there pretty good still. Also, in last week's episode I talked about how the lacquer blistered up a little bit. There's an area where you can see that blistering I was talking about. That's from the heat and from the lacquer being so thin. But there was a couple little blisters back here that I need to repair. I'll repair it all actually, but they're really hard to see, but there they are. We'll get that all tidied up. Alright, now so I've widened those two holes to accept the steam needle. I tried drilling some more right here, still hitting solid wood. There's no void along the heel here. Let's got a little water in the steamer. This is the HGR-2000S. Alright, so you can see over there I've got the neck removal jig attached to the guitar, just making sure I have the right fittings. Or the right size. Now here's the steam. I'm going to bring the guitar over here. Get our foam underneath the neck to protect it. We'll put it at a slight angle so the water drips off the heel and not down the back of the guitar. HGR-2000S. S for steam. I like to do a couple shots per side. Per side meaning bass side, treble side. And then I'll hold the guitar upside down, see if any water drips out. I don't want excess water sitting in the pocket. As we've seen some delamination on some guitars this year. Although I believe the dovetail construction on an LGO is a one solid piece of mahogany. There shouldn't be any delam, but the body itself has laminations. It has a laminated sides and back. So those may delaminate if they're sitting in a pool of water. Anyways, 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there. Stop to wipe up the lacquer. We don't want lacquer pooled up, or we don't want water pooled up on the lacquer for very long. Either way, it never came loose down there in the garage, so I brought it back up. I let it dry out for a bit, and I went back to the electric heat probes. The hot foam factories. Cutting foam cutters. Foam hot factory. So I guess we'll jig it up in the Stumac neck pulling jig. Apply a little pressure. One of these days I want to make a screw for my Proppers guitar workstation where it will push the neck out, jigged up into the total vise. So as you can see here, all in all, pretty clean. The tip of the dovetail still stuck down in the mortise side of the dovetail joint. The tenon popped off, just the tip. We'll get that out of there with a wet paper towel and a soldering pen to steam it out. Steam it out a little further and I'll glue it back on. But you can see that there's a massive amount of wood-to-wood surface, and that's why they're stuck on so good. There's a little blushed looking lighter colored blemish around the base side, and I thought I would try this pumice to see if it gets rid of that light color, which it does not, which means the lacquer may have lifted. This is the Meguiar's Ultra Cut Compound 105. Sometimes it'll get rid of a blushed lacquer, but it does not this time, which means we'll either have to mechanically remove the discolored lacquer or try to wick some lacquer retarder down in between the wood and the lacquer. And I'm going for the latter. Got to make this look right before I put the neck back on. You see a number down in there in the dovetail. I don't know what that corresponds to, but it's not the serial number. This is lacquer retarder in a dish. So I score the lacquer and break the surface of it so the retarder has somewhere to flow into. I figured I'd do that right along the binding edge, and in the process of doing that, you'll see it's very chippy. It's old, it's brittle, and it's chippy, and it's 60-year-old lacquer, and it's like 3-4 coats. They don't put hardly anything on these LGOs. The LG1s have a much thicker, I'm talking 10 coats. 10, 12 coats. It's quite thick, but here it is. We're getting it in there. Now, if this were to happen on a guitar that were a poly finish, I would be using Glue Boost Fill and Finish Ultra Thin instead of lacquer retarder. But since this is a lacquer guitar, we can re-amalgamate the stuff. It'll look a little dark at first, but then it should lighten up tomorrow. There's a little bubble. I'll pop it open. It's like popping zits. Oh, a little chip fell off. We'll end up doing some touch-up later. We'll drop fill some full thickness lacquer on here tomorrow, the next day. Okay, after a couple hours it doesn't look too bad, but I did chip off a little bit of lacquer, so I'm going to drop fill. I ended up drop filling twice last night and once this morning, so that's 3 drops in that area. I'm going to set it aside for a few days, and then maybe I'll work on the Dovetail while we're waiting for that to cure fully, and then we'll see if we can sand it and buff it.
Now I do sandpaper pull. I hope you enjoyed that new number fresh off my GarageBand mixes. So after a few sandpaper pulls, I'll restring it again, jig it back up. You know, I haven't added a dovetail shim in there yet, so it's loose. It's loose as a goose. The neck is loose in the body. It doesn't have a shim. So I wanna make sure I'm like not just in the ballpark, but like going across third base before I put in my shim. I put in a temporary shim actually, and also I want to finish up buffing the side of the guitar that needed a little touch up. And these files that you see me using, when you're level sanding a drop fill, it's best to use a super hard block, or better yet, just use a file. These fret end bevel files from StewMac are such a fine tooth. They don't even leave scratch marks in the lacquer. So first I go with the fret end file, and then I go to the Kovacs stick sandpaper on the or the toll cut sandpaper on the Kovacs block. Yeah, the Kovacs is like a hockey puck. You can make your own sanding blocks with hockey pucks. Cut them on the bandsaw to whatever size you like. Sandpaper pulls. Get that fit. Make sure there's the gap. There's always a little bit of gappage with my neck sets. I'm still not to the perfection, perfect fit. I get a perfect angle usually, but not a perfect fit. And so I'm going to remove my temporary shim that I had on the treble side of the dovetail, and I'm going to place my new shim after I clean up the treble side. I'm going to sand it with a 80 grit and 100 grit sandpaper on a stick. I'll also use a file. Make sure there's no trace of that old temporary shim. I'll use the 20 thousandths of an inch maple veneer shims from StewMac. I'll just dry fit it first. Before I glue it on, I'll dry fit it to see that the fretboard extension still has a little, like an 1/8 inch gap, maybe a 1/16 of an inch, something like that. Yeah, see that little gap there? That's enough to work with. After I glue it on, it'll even be a little bit bigger of a gap due to the thickness of the glue. But then we'll shape the shim, and we'll sneak up on getting this guy fit real nice. And for the shim, I've decided to use LHG. So you're going to see me use LHG, liquid hide glue, and then later you'll see me use hot hide glue, HHG, when I attach the neck to the body permanently. And then you'll see me get out the LHG again for some gap filling and some fret reinstalling. So the Franklin Brown Bottle liquid hide glue is good for certain things, and then the hot hide glue, of course, is good for other certain things. Although the hide glue doesn't need to stay clamped for very long, I like to take the clamps off, because the wax paper on the cauls actually inhibits the final curing. So you can see there's still some moisture there and tackiness due to the wax. So let it air dry for a little bit longer. You may have noticed that gelatinous ball of hot hide glue that I scraped off from squeeze out from the fretboard extension. I'm going to set that on the bench overnight, and then in the morning the next day I'll take a look at it and see how hard it's getting. Hot hide glue has this property that's magnificent, that it pulls the two wooden parts together really good, and it dries rock hard. You'll never get creepage with hot hide glue. It's brittle though. It may break if it's hit hard enough, but otherwise this neck's not going anywhere. It's not going to fall off the guitar, in other words. Well, right now what I'm doing is I'm cleaning the old debris or rosewood off the fret tangs, and I'm going to reinstall those 2 frets that I pulled at the beginning of the video. I'm trying to get it in focus. Sometimes I can pick off the rosewood pieces with an X-Acto blade, and then I'll use an old toothbrush and some hot water to do a final cleaning. And then I have to re-bend it a little bit, not much. Sometimes when you pull a fret, it straightens it out, so we need to re-bend it to marry up with the fretboard radius, which is about a 9.5-inch radius, guys. Gibson doesn't always use a 12-inch radius throughout their history. I've seen ones from the 30s that have more or less a 9.5, 10-inch as well. Some of their very first flat tops that they ever built, the LG-0s, I've seen those. I use the LHG again for fret reinstall procedures. Yes, LHG is good for me, and it's good for you to use this glue. It's not as toxic as some other glues. Even fish glue, you don't want to get it on your fingers. I keep seeing my friend Doug McCormick getting it all over his hands, and we had a chemist come in and tell us there are some ingredients in there that you don't want getting into your skin. Stop, Doug. We love you. But anyways, it cleans up with warm water, and there's one small crescent of a drill hole from when I injected the steam, when I drilled that hole for the steam. I'll get to that in a minute, but I'll get to that with these wax furniture touch-up sticks. Actually, I have different browns. I use the darkest one on the rosewood, and I use a lighter brown on the mahogany, as needed. And then what you saw there along the gap, there's a little gap at the heel to body, so I use the furniture touch-up stick, and then I use the LHG, and then over top of the LHG I use lacquer. But this is the bridge plate repair. Now, if you go back to last week, we did a full-on bridge plate repair and a reinstallment of the bridge. Actually, we took off the plastic bridge and we made a rosewood, Madagascar rosewood replacement bridge and glued it on in last week's video. If you have a hard time finding last week's video, just go to my channel and scroll back through all the videos. Or if you just do a YouTube search, just search for this old Gibson 66 LG-0, and you'll find it. It has a thumbnail of the bridge right on the video. So sometimes, as normal, the 14th and 15th fret area has a little hump in the fretboard due to the new neck angle, and so I had to file down those 2 frets that I just reinstalled. Had to do a little leveling of and recrowning and polishing. I just did the whole fretboard. Only took 10 minutes. Naphtha to clean. I might put a little Howard's Feedin' Wax on this fretboard as well, and the bridge. Beautiful dark burgundy rosewood color to these fine pieces of rosewood. And you know, I don't mind the screwed on pickguard all that much because it was a really nice nitrocelluloid pickguard material that they used. It has a nice swirl in it.
Alright, so here we have it tuned up to pitch with the bluegrass strings. That's 12 through 56. And we still have a decent break angle even though I lowered it significantly. We have a nice low string action here at the 12th fret. We've got 2.25 millimeters and 1.75 millimeters on the high E string. We got a super straight neck. Truss rod's not even engaged. It's kind of rare. Would that be the case? And that concludes the LGO. I'm going to play it for you, but I wanted to let you guys know that I've already got started on the next neck pull, neck reset. It's a 71 Gibson Southern Jumbo. An SJ. This is Norland era Gibson Kalamazoo. Nice clean neck pull though. Doesn't get any cleaner than that. I found a way of heating the fretboard extension in a way that where I've heated it from the inside and the top side. And there's no spruce missing. Really good pull. And the inlays, the celluloid inlays, I did not torch them this time. I protected them with a little aluminum foil, kind of like rolled up 3 layers thick and taped in place. Let's hear that Yeah, rarely are these necks as straight as this. They're usually warped pretty bad. Pretty punchy sounding guitar. Thanks for tuning in, guys. It's been a record year of neck resets. And this is the first LGO I've ever done. I've done LG1s, LG2s, LG3s, but never an LGO. This is the first LGO neck reset. Done a lot of bridges. I've made like 3 or 4 of these bridges this year. So thanks again to Dave over at Scale Model, and all of you guys for watching. See you next year.